1. I think we've hacked into the mainframe. All right. Hello and welcome back to Colonial Outcasts. It is a whole new week of March 4th. And here's our customary operational breakdown that we do after every weekend, because the weekends are when the state of Israel likes to pull its customary shenanigans. You know, when people are distracted. But the gnarliest hangover in the world could not distract me from the absolute PR nightmares that unfolded over the past few days, not to mention the absolute unmitigated atrocity that we'll get to. So they're all connected, and we're going to break them down one by one. So as usual, we've got myself, Greg Stoker, who was, for the context of this episode, a former U.S. Army Ranger with practical experience in military intelligence collection analysis, co-host Mark Wayne, who went through ROTC before getting irrevocably injured, which happens, and returning regular Travis, a former field grade West Point artillery officer. Now, hi,
wait,
guys.
Wait, hold on. OCS, right. Not ROTC.
Oh, OC, that's Officer Candidate School, for those you don't know. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Significantly harder.
Okay, yeah, it is significantly harder than ROTC. Okay, so as usual, I already said that paragraph. Going on to paragraph 3. Now, before we dive in, let's try to limit the F-bombs and sundry swear words, because the YouTube AI audio scrubbers will limit our reach, and we're trying to grow this thing. That being said, let's rehash a brief timeline of events from the past 10 days. So, boom, Sunday, February 25th, Aaron Bushnell, Air Force airman, performs extreme act of protest, shocking the world. White House ignores it like we predicted they would last week. Zio and far-right interests pull the mental health card, as well as the corporate media, in order to discredit the action. On the 26th of February, the day after Netanyahu said the IDF will move into Rafah regardless of a ceasefire. Typical reasonable talk. On the 27th, the Michigan primary came back with over 100,000 voters making an uncommitted on their ballots for the Democratic primary. Kind of got some people nervous. Biden responded with a statement over ice cream that there should be a ceasefire plan in place by Monday, which is today/yesterday, the 4th, depending on where you live in this world. Still no ceasefire, obviously. Then last Thursday, the infamous flower massacre occurred, which we'll touch on later, when an Israeli force opened fire on civilians around an aid convoy. We're not going to get into it in excruciating detail, as the BBC, a generally pro-Israel media outlet, has already debunked the IDF's official story. Then Friday was spent desperately trying to do damage control, but that didn't work. So the Biden administration airdropped 38,000 military rations into Gaza in a move roundly criticized by the international humanitarian organization community for obvious reasons. It was a shameless PR stunt. Also, we're going to touch on that. And this weekend, opposition leader Benny Gantz and primary political rival of Bibi Netanyahu is set to meet with U.S. leadership this week, bypassing Bibi, and apparently Bibi is really pissed. Then Kamala, sorry, I did the hey thing. Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States, disingenuously called for a ceasefire in Selma, Alabama, of all places. Bombings of Rafah and Khan Yunis have recommenced. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant wants to draft the ultra-conservative Jews into the IDF, causing mass riots in Tel Aviv. Let's see what else. An audio recording of the IDF shooting 3 hostages on December 18th in Gaza was leaked to the Hebrew media, causing more outrage. And then a number of senior officers from the IDF spokesperson unit have resigned, but now the media says they haven't resigned. Jesus effing Christ. It's a lot of BS to sift through, but let's just jump in and start with the ceasefire deal and what Kamala Harris had to say about it, because it's very indicative of what's going to happen in the future and what the Biden administration's real intentions are, which is pretty much nothing changes, except they're trying to play for cover. Okay, let's do it. Bringing it up, and enjoy, folks.
Of Hamas poses to the people of Israel must be eliminated. And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire.
All right, see that intentional pause real quick? Great soundbite to take out of context, because she qualifies the rest of this big time.
For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table. This will get the hostages out and get a significant amount of aid in.
Get the hostages out and get a significant amount of aid in. And she goes on in the statement to say, Hamas claims they want a ceasefire, and if that's what they want, this is what's on the table. So I don't think she realized that she just tacitly admitted that they're using hunger and the collective punishment of the people in Gaza as a tool to force a ceasefire. But, so that's where the Biden administration stands right now. What are your guys' observations about this coming? I don't think we've seen Kamala Harris for like 3 years, but all of a sudden she's out there.
I think it's much safer for the administration, and who they're beholden to have her say it than the president say it. And I think that's why you're seeing it coming from her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard some interesting theories that it's because Biden looks especially weak, so they're trying to center her as a potential, not replacement, but at least the Democrats can content themselves that they have a strong vice president. I don't know if that's possible.
I don't think that's worked at any point in the last 4 years, and I don't know why they would think it would work now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you follow the Democrats in this administration's politics, that makes no sense.
Yeah. So as usual, this is for the liberals. They're doing vote shaming again, threatening people with Trump. But I did want to circle back in light of this to the airdrop on Saturday. I'm sure you had a chance to look at that.
Yeah, you covered this extensively already, but it's completely ridiculous to use aircraft to drop supplies when you've got 500 trucks sitting across the border. And to be like, well, okay, you got to get Israel to let them in. Well, you also have to let them fly through your airspace and drop stuff too. So you tell me which requires more coordination. In my experience, airspace requires significantly more coordination.
Yeah, deconflicting air assets, especially with the amount of drones they have flying over Gaza and other sundry air assets. It's absolutely insane. So I mean, I was hearing one of my friends was telling me an interesting theory that dropping aid is actually a hedge. It allows them to push back against claims of complicity in Israel's genocide, where they can say, look, we dropped aid. We dropped aid, and then Israel opened up their airspace to let that aid in. So could give them room for some pushback too. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they did it. That, and to distract from the fact that the flower massacre just happened, and there's no real way to explain that away. And going back to that, before we started, we were talking about what were the casualty figures on that?
It was like approximately 100 people killed and 750 wounded. I mean, the count is insane. It's wounding 750 people takes a lot of work, Yeah.
And killing 100, because it's not like Hollywood, where 5.56 round, which is the caliber that a lot of these Israeli assault rifles use, you're going to need more than one bullet per person generally to kill them. And then you did 750. So if a lot of this was small arms fire, which based off of NPR's reporting, when the casualties got back to the hospital, about 80% had gunshot wounds. Based off of NPR's own reporting, they must have really opened up and gone for full cyclic with small arms. I don't see it how else you would produce that many casualties, even if a tank did fire a couple shells.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know how you get anything close to that number. And I don't know how many IOF troops are on the ground, doing the actual trigger pulling, but you would need a lot. 750 people is a lot of people to wound, plus the 100 killed. So, you get close to it, 3 battalions worth of casualties there. How did you do that? And then the other question I had too was if you're going to fire, where in a crowd do you fire a tank shell? It's a very interesting question, I think. Where in a crowd of civilians do you fire a tank shell? What was your target?
Probably the highest density of civilians. Not to mention they intentionally ran over people. I mean, we have the photographic evidence of guys with zip ties still on their wrists, just run over by tanks.
Yeah, I mean, like it's not like they weren't taking RPG fire or something from some fortified position in the crowd. Like what did you shoot? What justified firing a tank at these people? So I mean, we know the answer, but yeah, pretty wild.
Yeah, apparently the IDF spokespeople that resigned but didn't actually resign said they were somehow endangering the troops. But those troops, based up had a pretty good standoff distance, and they blamed a stampede, which is interesting, dehumanizing language because cattle stampede, bison stampede, so unruly, inhuman beasts stampede. So that was also an interesting aspect of their reporting on this. But yeah, I don't think there's any two ways about it. I don't think that many people could possibly crush each other. And then again, it doesn't explain away all the gunshot wounds that were on the ground.
Yeah, and if you were trying to get people to run each other over, firing into them in mass, and then firing tank shells into them in mass, that's probably a good way to do it. It's probably a good way to get 1,000 people to run at one time.
Mm-hmm. So,
I think you don't.
I mean,
Mark, I think we're missing sound on you.
Yeah.
There you go.
I muted myself.
So yeah, it seems like over the weekend, a couple days later, a couple senior members of the IDF spokesperson team, including Lieutenant Colonel Daniel, there's a list, Hagari, apparently resigned, according to Channel 14 News, which is a Hebrew media outlet. And then it made the rounds. The story went viral. And then earlier today, they said, nope, just kidding. They had not actually resigned. And if we actually go into the article published, it has to do with there's an ongoing manpower crisis, right? Israeli army spokesperson has witnessed a large spokesperson unit has witnessed a large wave of resignations. A large number of officers recently announced their retirement from the unit. Several officers have reportedly complained about not moving up in the ranks. The picture is complex since it is a military system, and sometimes people reach retirement age and leave for no particular reason. But despite this, the number of people who retire at once during a war is unusual. The Israeli military has not responded for requests for comments. This comes as resignations have sparked tensions in the Israeli military establishment. We've got Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is calling for an end to draft exceptions for Israel's ultra-Orthodox community, citing a severe manpower crisis in the army. He said, quote, "The army is in need of manpower now. It's not a matter of politics. It's a matter of mathematics." And of course, this has sparked widespread protests within the Orthodox community in Tel Aviv. I'm going to bring one of those up right now. This was from the Cradle news source reporting. New draft law amendment threatening Netanyahu's coalition government. The amendment would formally exempt Orthodox Haredi from the military. It also seeks to add time to mandatory service and delay retirement for reservists. In protest, hundreds of Orthodox Haredi took to the streets of occupied Jerusalem to voice their refusal to serve, shutting down highways and clashing with Israeli security forces, where they go straight up American cop on these guys. The outrage about Gallant announced that although they would do this in the military during the ongoing war, the Haredi community's military exemption dates back to 1948, allowing its members to study the Torah full time. So I think we're starting to see the cracks in the facade of their military supremacy here. What do you think?
Well, what they just said, to use a phrase that we're more familiar with, what they just said is stop loss. So on top of, I just want to call that piece out because the Orthodox piece is obviously huge. But they talked about extending existing conscription, delaying retirement, basically keeping people in the system involuntarily who would normally be done with their time. And that's very interesting. right? The U.S. had to do that, but we're an all-volunteer military. The percentage of the population that serve is very low. This is a country that has conscription, and they're having this problem. That's pretty wild.
And I'll remind you that the Haredi community is the sect that, or the section of Judaism that mostly opposes the state of Israel. Some have outright opposed recognizing it. Some have recognized it, but still are against this formation. And a lot of them are very pro-Palestinian. So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And, but the fact that they had this manpower shortage on the eve where they keep saying they're going to assault Rafah, that they're going to take the assault to Hezbollah in the summer. I think there's just too many problems. If they're having a manpower shortage, they've also got an ammunition shortage. Then they've got the aid bill that is, that the Democrats have tied to Ukrainian aid, and that the Republicans have countered because they want more border security on the Texas-Mexican border. And that $14 billion earmarked for Israel is stuck in contest in the legislative body of the United States government. So they need the aid. A lot of that's going to be economic stimulus as well, because they've taken so many people out of the workforce. We see tens of thousands of Israeli citizens, dual citizens to another country, leaving every day, taking more people out of the workforce. You've got people displaced in the north. This just looks like a giant mess.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the first steps of, what we know historically causes apartheid states to collapse, which is economics. At the end of the day, it's always economics that does it.
Well, yeah, the security is expensive enough to maintain, not to mention standing up an army that you're not really using. It's just that. And then we're seeing the internal divisions begin within the Knesset, which, just last week voted unanimously on a declaration that they would never recognize a Palestinian state. Even the centrist element of the Knesset voted unanimously on that. But now we're seeing Benny Gantz, Bibi Netanyahu's like arch nemesis and opposition leader, go over, to meet Washington officials. So, this kind of definitely speaks to people actually might be sick of Netanyahu's BS and his inability to work with anybody or come to any arrangement, because maybe his existential political survival, and maybe his freedom is on the line, because once this war ends, he still has charges of corruption looming above him.
What decisions do you think Israelis are most opposed as far as Bibi Netanyahu? Like what is their main counter to what Bibi's decisions are that he's currently doing as far as the Israeli population?
Well, I mean, we see protests about him because he tried to dismantle the judiciary.
Yeah.
No, besides that, I'm talking about besides his trying to dismantle the judiciary branch and kind of neuter them. I'm talking about currently in the certain situation with Gaza or in the state of affairs right now.
The biggest criticism I've seen domestically, or that managed to get out of the country anyway, was the handling of hostage recovery. Right, that seemed to be the biggest one. Generally, the support for the actual prosecution of the conflict, horrifically, itself seems to be relatively high, other than specific groups.
That we've been told.
Yeah.
Again, all these polls are coming out of Israel. Everything coming out of Israel, data-wise, you gotta question it. Everything.
Yeah.
Even if Haaretz does it, Haaretz has been completely taken over. I mean, the Israeli government has confiscated. It's under captive. It's under captive journalism right now. Haaretz, and that was the most liberal publication. So you can't really tell what Israelis are thinking right now. And I always emphasize that whenever we get into this conversation, do not assume we know what Israelis are thinking, because we don't.
That is true, but we
do know who they're electing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've got a very good point, Mark. You don't, and honestly, the people who have differing views are probably not the ones making the TikTok videos, because they're
not allowed. I'll remind you, they're getting arrested. People are getting arrested, legit, going to jail for posting their opinion on anything. So in an environment like that, it's fertile territory for a silent majority. Not saying that there is a silent majority. I'm just saying there's always that possibility.
I think a silent minority is certainly possible, even likely. But again, I think given how their politics look, given how far right their middle is, and how extremely far right their right is, and how insanely right their ultra right is, I have to go off of their voting habits and say this looks like they support all these things to me, or at least a lot of them do.
Yeah, and whether or not there is a silent majority or minority, the performative effect is that they're still hosting raids with bounce houses and barbecue cookouts outside the Rafah crossing, blocking aid in, and the IDF's not doing anything about it. So the performative effect is the genocide continues, regardless if there's civil.
You could turn this, Zach, although to support what Mark said, though, I'll counter my own argument and just flip it around. You could say the same thing about the United States, right? If you looked at our politics right now, you would say that the majority of Americans don't support a ceasefire, right? Because the majority of our political side, Republicans and Democrats, don't. But we know from open U.S. polling that that's not true. The majority of Americans have supported the ceasefire since December, at least. And so, the politicians not being a good representation of the people, well, we have examples of that ourselves. So curious.
Yeah, that is a solid point. But circling back to Netanyahu, he's even less popular right now because today or yesterday, the audio recording of the IDF shooting of 3 hostages on December 18th in Gaza was leaked to the Hebrew media. The Jerusalem Post was the first to publish it, I believe, and the audio recording was from the GoPro attached to a K9 bomb detection dog. So and apparently they self-identified, self-located, said, "Save us. We're hostages," and then pop, 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 pop.
Right. I got a question.
That's definitely inflamed the bring them home sentiment as well.
So I got a question about those hostages, and this is all very speculative. Are we thinking that they were just so trigger happy that they genuinely thought that they were, Hamas? Or is it possible that this is kind of part of that Hannibal protocol, in the sense of, let's given the history of the hostages coming back and having sometimes positive reports of how Hamas treated them, that was causing a huge propaganda nightmare for Israel. Is it possible that these hostages were let go by Hamas? I mean, I've heard that they were able to escape, but is it possible that Israel was afraid of them coming back with another positive report of Hamas treating them well, and they just executed it for the sake of preventing a propaganda nightmare or a PR nightmare for them? Just pure speculation.
I would have a hard time believing that you could get line troops to follow that order, personally.
Line troops to follow? You mean Israeli line troops?
Yeah, well, yeah, on their own hostages. I mean, I know that their Hannibal doctrine is a real thing. I'm not discounting any of that. This to me looks like an ROE training discipline issue. And what I took away from it, or what I extrapolated from it, without a whole lot of information, is if you see unarmed people speaking Hebrew and you shoot them down, well, that tells me how much of a chance the Palestinian civilian on the street, how much evaluation they're getting, right?
And it all depends on where that IDF soldier came from. Mind you, that Israel puts a lot of settlers in the ranks, especially the front lines. And these settlers are the most fanatical. So they a lot of
settlers are in the hostage groups too. So
no, I know, but there was a situation, for example, where a settler gunned down another Israeli who was drawing his weapon on a supposed, other guy, and that settler had no remorse for shooting down an Israeli. So you have to understand the fanatical nature of these settlers who are in uniform. They have no qualms about shooting their own. They've been known to do that, and that's something that we're not really exposed to over here. Those dynamics that happen on the battlefield between Israeli IDF soldiers who are settlers and regular kind of IDF conscripts. If that makes any sense, I'm just trying to explain it as best as I can. Those dynamics.
I mean, it could be just people. Could be guys just scared, because we know they're definitely scared.
Yeah.
They could be yelling like "Save me" in Hebrew. We're hostages, but it's easy to pick up Hebrew, I guess. Like simple words. They could have been like, "Oh, got to side on the side of caution, and they just lit up who they are, and they're probably used to it because there's ample evidence that they've just been lighting up civilians, and
that's what I'm thinking. That's what I think it is, right? Because to me what that tells me is that's how you treat unarmed. That's how you react to unarmed persons in your zone. You're just shooting people.
Yeah.
Which is why they use the Hamas doesn't wear uniforms. Argument, which makes no sense to us. We were in Iraq and Afghanistan. No one wore uniforms. You know how you tell the difference between a combatant and a non-combatant? You just ask yourself, does that guy have a gun? If the answer is no, probably not a combatant. So,
I heard the dog got killed too.
I mean, maybe.
No, there's a report that the dog actually got shot
by their own guys.
No idea. Didn't say.
Huh.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. So apparently the bombings in Rafah and Khan Yunis have recommenced again this weekend. Over 60 strikes. They're still not invading Rafah again. They're within the same article I was reading from, published originally by the Cradle. It was reported by Channel 14 News that some of this dissent was coming from disagreements over how Rafah would be prosecuted, which makes a lot of sense to me because we talked about this 2 weeks ago. We still have no idea how you would prosecute Rafah, and they must not either because they haven't done it.
Well, it specifically, it seemed like one of the arguments between the senior officers, senior leadership was, Netanyahu's telling us just go in. He's like, but there's no plan. There's no plan to relocate any of the super dense refugee population that's in there. So how do you expect to carry out an operation, right? To your point, is the question we asked last time. How would you even do that? It's insane. Yeah.
No, I mean it's been the same thing from the beginning with this quote unquote military operation. They've had no achievable goals. They've had no achievable operational goals. Yeah, they said they dismantle Hamas and then get all the hostages back, but those are too vague to implement.
Yeah. I haven't believed since December at least that was a real goal of theirs. You're using aerial bombardment and sending in wire teams to detonate entire city blocks because your primary, the prosecution made no sense for those goals.
The bombs dropping in Rafah, are they mostly JDAMs or are we talking about bunker busters too? Or because I thought the original reason for the assault in Rafah because that's where the highest concentration of tunnel networks were. So do we have any of that info?
Okay, well, here's the thing. JDAMs and bunker busters are the same thing. JDAM's the guidance package that you can attach to any number of bombs. So, yeah, we just say JDAM, which is Joint Direct Attack Munition.
The bombs are they're the GBU series bombs typically, except for the 750-pound dumb bombs were not GBU series. They're older. But when the U.S. military says JDAM, it's a GBU bomb with that guidance package bolted onto the nose. You can also drop them in dumb mode.
This is why it was for the better that I didn't graduate OCS.
No, you wouldn't have been calling in those because we don't really call those in. Unlike our allies in the East, our allies.
So back to my general question though. Do we know if these are bunker busters mostly being dropped in Rafah, or is that the intention is to penetrate deep down to disrupt these tunnel networks? Or is it are we talking about just destroying general surface structures?
I mean, that's how it's been the whole time. I mean, some of these tunnels, I mean, they themselves have said go down 80 feet, and that's beyond the capacity, the operational effectiveness of a 2,000-pound bomb. I remember what the D class depth is 50 feet.
Yeah, I mean Earth shit.
The unclassified depth. Yeah,
we're not supposed to swear for YouTube.
No, we're past the 10-minute mark. I think we're.
Oh, okay, good. I was gonna say because shit tons of dirt around things tend to dissipate the effects of bombs relatively rapidly.
Yeah,
right? So it's very hard to go that deep. I did think of something interesting too, which is if supposedly the largest concentration of tunnel networks is under Rafah, then why was Rafah chosen as the push to and concentrate point for all civilians by the IOF. Why would you do that? Well, because it was to push them into Egypt the whole time, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're thinking too hard. Don't think about why they push the hottest area where they said 3 battalions of Hamas are hiding in the highest concentration of tunnels as the safe zone.
Yeah.
It's just the thing I love about the IDF propaganda. It doesn't survive a single round of questioning. Not even a round of questioning, just like one question.
Yeah.
It doesn't survive.
Literally my, brand new butter bar lieutenant analysts, in the 3 shop would pick up the problems with this plan. I think right out the gate, like, hey, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah. And again, they have a manpower crisis. So that's not the only aspect to this ongoing strategic nightmare that they're in. First of all, you have the politically fracturing government. We can see it. We have the political pressure on the Democrats in the Biden administration continuing to mount, which they don't like. They're still using the words. They've changed the word humanitarian pause to ceasefire, but ceasefire is still a pause because she said 6 weeks. So there's no policy change, just a language change.
Yeah.
But we all see through it. So pressure is going to keep mounting, and the fractures are going to continue to expand. And if they're having civil dissent over this new draft proposal where they're recruiting protected classes, or they want to recruit protected classes and stop loss guys, and they've got an ammunition shortage, and you still have Hezbollah to the north, which has been a problem for them since day one. Daily rocket attacks, and I've been hearing from people I've been talking to in southern Lebanon. Word is on the street that they attempted 2 to 3 forced reconnaissance incursions into southern Lebanon. I don't know if you saw that, Travis.
I didn't.
Yeah. Well, I think my favorite news media.
What was the composition? Did they know?
No report on that yet. I mean, probably like scout platoons. If it happened.
Yeah.
Or like small special operations forces. So of course, the only mainstream media that reports on any of this, aside from like Al Jazeera, is the Hindustani Times, because they're totally corporate, but Bollywood loves drama. So I'm going to pull that up real quick and see what we've got. Okay.
Does it have dramatic music too, like last time?
Yeah, there's no words. There's only subtitles, which I'm going to have to read out for the guys and gals only listening to the audio.
We're relying completely on your knowledge of Indian media. So,
well, it's in English. So
no, I just mean like as far as credibility goes. Like I don't know the Wall Street Journal from the Sun.
Okay, this is less bought, and it's more centrist than the Times of India. It's all right. All right.
Considered credible. Yeah.
Yeah. Near Israel forces try to enter Lebanon. Hezbollah's bold claim. Hostile Israeli forces tried to infiltrate. Allegation.
I'm just going to say right here, Greg, this does not look like a good recon to me, but okay.
Yeah, Hezbollah claims this is B-roll. This is all B-roll. Like
it's just this random footage from like the past years.
I should not be seeing the entire platoon.
Yeah. Okay. Hamas's Lebanese ally fights off Israeli infiltrators. They basically just report the same thing over and over again to dramatic music to try to get ad revenue on YouTube, which I love. After months of aerial strikes, full Israel Hezbollah war now? ? Hezbollah on March 4th accused Israeli forces of trying to forcibly enter Lebanon. And that again is the word on the street. Lebanon-based Hezbollah alleged at least 2 separate infiltration attempts. See how repetitive they are? We'll just keep it going for another 30 seconds. Hezbollah said infiltration attempts took place on intervening night of March 3rd and 4th. So, okay. At 11:45 p.m. on March 3rd, hostile Israeli force tried to infiltrate the Lebanese territory. Oh my God, this just keeps going on. Okay, yeah, IDF has not commented. And what else? Come on, Hindustan Times. Okay, and then IDF says they struck some stuff. anyways, a lot of this stuff on the ground is going to be confused. This is the story, though. I don't know why they would seek an escalation with Hezbollah, especially right now. Yeah, it's all insanity.
It's just so funny watching you guys try to make sense of it. You guys are thinking in such reasonable, logical military minds, and I'm just hearing you guys. I'm seeing the mainframe crash in y'all's minds. And
oh yeah, and then there's I'm seeing it juxtaposed with what looks like a basic training rifle range. So it's hard to.
Private. The reason why your gun isn't shooting because there's no ammo in there. Private. It's just like there's no sense to it. It's. I want to talk something about the resignations for a second. How much would we speculate that mental health issues are a factor in that?
Let me qualify that.
The retention problem and the stop loss problem, I 100% believe is being massively impacted by that. The senior level resignations, I wouldn't align those things.
No, yeah, but the commanding officers, which by the way are like really young and common, far between. It's like being manager at a McDonald's.
Yeah, their inability to keep the ground units like manned. Yeah, 100% agree. It's got to be an issue. It's got to be part of it.
We know.
Do you remember how unpopular stop loss was in the United States? And again, we're talking about a policy that affected less than 1% of the U.S. population, which is not what's going on there because that's a conscription country.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was up in arms about it. They made Hollywood movies against it.
Yeah,
during the global war on terror.
I forgot about the movies. Holy crap!
Yeah, they made a bunch of movies about stopping the stop loss program, and in those movies, there's people like killing themselves from PTSD.
The guys running to Canada, and so I do remember now.
Yeah. So that was. Yeah, it's not great for your mental health when you think, oh, my contract's almost up. And then you're like, oh, wait, going back into the shit.
So you got policies like that there. And then, to Mark's point, one of the groups they're trying to pull in historically doesn't support the state's function anyway. That's real interesting.
That's going to be real interesting to watch that play out. The Haratis have been putting up a huge fight in their neighborhoods. Pro-Palestinian protest.
They're the ones that you constantly see videos of getting the crap kicked out of them by Israeli cops for putting up like Palestinian flags and stuff, right?
Yeah. Now, Harati Jews are diverse in the sense that not all of them are pro-Palestinian, but a big chunk of them are, and those are the ones that you will see videos of. So
I mean, basically taking in all of this, you had the massive PR scandal that they tried to downplay with Aaron Bushnell. Then you had Biden saying, there's going to be a ceasefire Monday. Obviously, there wasn't going to be a ceasefire. The flower massacre happened. Then he's like, okay, a ceasefire is going to be more difficult now.
The vote in Michigan, which you did mention, cannot be downplayed, right? That like 100,000. What's it called? It's not no choice. What do they call the vote that they did?
Uncommitted.
100,000 something uncommitted votes in Michigan, which is a swing state in the election and matters, has enough electoral votes to matter. That's a big deal.
Now think of the psychological domino effect that's going to happen on a lot of other towns. This is just the beginning, of that.
I don't think they're doing nearly enough damage control. And looking at the Israeli government, it looks like it's barely holding itself together. You've got potentially an internecine strife happening between the opposition party and Bibi's party. Well,
what happens to your American political allies when you start becoming a problem for them? When you become a problem for them, you're immediately not friends anymore. They will talk to the opposition, and in some previous decades, we'd overthrow your government. That's what the U.S. used to do. Mm-hmm. If you were problematic, Bibi would be lucky if it's just we start talking to the opposite.
Israel's like, oh shit, are they going to do the same thing that they did to the Arab nations in Iran? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, you're inconvenient now? Cool. I'm dropping Green Berets in your backfield and you're going to have to enjoy it.
Yeah. Because people don't understand that Western imperialism is beholden to no man. It's a huge system. I mean, so.
It does not have friends.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
Well, I was going to ask, do we know any concrete numbers on how many IDF soldiers are currently on standby, currently being used, and how many they're running short of? I mean, or we're just hearing words like shortage. But what does that mean? What's a number that goes with that word?
So their operational security is horrible, but it's not that horrible. I mean, we're not going to have access to that specific information.
Well, I remember at the beginning of the buildup going into Gaza, I heard a number of like 300,000 that were being amassed. That to me, I was like, they're amassing 300,000. Where are they, and how many are actually in Gaza right now? I understand that all this is.
That was just the reservists activated. Those weren't like ground troops going into fight. That'd be
right.
insane.
They're on standby, but they're activated, meaning they were having to, band together somewhere. So, as far as that's concerned, with in reference to,
I bet that's probably some kind of notification system. I mean, the U.S. Army is 450,000, right? So I have a hard time believing they can field 300,000 combat troops in a country that small.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But the way that they were portraying it on the news was exactly that.
Yeah.
They're saying they're amassing 300,000, getting ready for the invasion. And then I'm thinking, okay, how many are you going to put on the Lebanese border? Like, how many are you going to commit to that conflict?
Well, here's the thing you have to remember about Israeli media. It doesn't really give a lot of context. Its main method of deterrence is scaring the living shit out of everybody. So yeah, they can say like 300,000 reservists were activated, but like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah. A text message, Travis.
I mean, did you get a text message? Be like, have your packing list ready, in case
a Facebook notification.
Yeah. And also we don't know how their military is organized. Like I've been trying to figure that out the whole time. Like, I don't know what their platoon organization is or company organization is, battalion. All I know is that they have 22-year-old company commanders.
The only way to understand the organization, if you compare them to NATO forces, it'll just confuse the crap out of you. Their closest comparative relatives are all the neighboring states. So they actually have more in common structurally with like the Iraqi army by rank structure and age than they do with any Western military. If you look at their titles and the level and how they use them, their use of warrant officers as the top of the NCO chain and not a separate officer group, all those things are parallel to the Arab armies in the region. And that's actually who they look like, much more structurally.
Interesting. I always thought it was comparable to the former Soviet bloc countries.
Yeah. I mean, if you compare them side by side with the Iraqi army, the rank structure is identical.
Huh.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Which, I mean, those are their former, Soviet satellite too. So that may, those may all stem from that, but that is who they look like.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, massive like military dysfunction. I made a video earlier today saying that, I think every time we see them feel like emasculated and they don't know what to do and frustrated, these massacres, there's a big uptick in what happens, especially on the ground. So based off of everything that happened this weekend, the shakeup, the internal tensions, I think like even the guys on the ground know that something must be up, like all's not well at home. And, that makes people more scared and that makes people more trigger happy. And I think it's only going to get worse. I think there might unfortunately be another massive, whoopsie flower massacre.
In Rafah, you think? Because that's what I've been thinking. It's going to, like you were talking about, what is that going to look like in Rafah? The flower massacre is what I'm looking at when it comes to Rafah. Another one of those, maybe a bigger one.
Well, yeah, they have nowhere to go, and they're going to be scared, and people are going to be screaming. And then Israeli soldiers are like kind of remind me of American cops. It's like when they get scared, American citizens start dying. That's when people get shot for no reason. When a cop gets like hit by an acorn and just opens up. I don't know if you saw that recent video, but yeah, I mean, I think that's that's what's going to happen when they go into Rafah. If they go into Rafah. So this 6-week humanitarian pause is very cynical as well, because, it'll say it's an attempt to try to appease the Arabs and the Muslim, so that they'll be distracted with like religious observances. And also there are more Democratic primaries during the month of March. There's a ton. So having this ceasefire in effect will help the Democratic Party.
It will for sure. I 100% agree with you. This is not an argument against that. I do also think though that if you were able to shut this down for 6 weeks, I don't think it restarts.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying that.
Yeah,
I think everybody's
turns off long enough. The stuff that's going to come out of there once the media can get back on the ground and people can plug their phones back in and aren't day-to-day struggle for survival. The stories and data that's going to come out of there, I think it's going to be appalling. I mean, it's going to be more horrific than it already is, and everyone's watching, and anyone who wasn't watching in December is watching now.
Yeah.
So I don't see how this thing shuts off for 6 weeks and then restarts. That doesn't make. I don't think that flies.
No, because I know for a fact how uncomfortable like the East Coast elites are, and like the liberals and the independents are. They don't want to feel that way. Okay, They don't like it. It's yucky.
They don't want 50,000 Anne Frank novels coming out on their phone all at once.
We didn't talk about the handful of Democrat reps that went there recently, who were nominally at least, they were AIPAC bought, mostly nominally pro-Israel, and came back all making anti-statements. Did you see that?
Who were? I mean,
it wasn't like Pelosi, but it was.
She's a lost cause, dude. The only God she prays to is her own insider trading game.
I heard it's very wise to follow her stock choices, though.
A lot of people do. We can talk about that while Travis pulls this up.
Yeah, so it was senior Democrat from House Appropriations Committee, Rosa DeLauro. It was another one that has the like dyed hair in the front. Sean Casten from Illinois, Madeline Dean of Pennsylvania, Becca Balin of Vermont, 2 people from California. But yeah, they came back making statements critical of Netanyahu and the prosecution of the war and the treatment of Palestinians in general. I mean, some like broad brush stuff, but again, these are people that previously I don't think any of them have voted for ceasefire. I have to go check that because maybe some of them did, but several of them did not.
No, pretty much only the members of the quote unquote squad.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got what's his name, the senior Democrat in the Senate. No, in the House, I forgot. One of the big establishment ones, really like senior ones did, but yeah, the rest of them it's all AOC and Rashida Tlaib and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to remind people that despite the change of some of these politicians' rhetoric, they're not changing their policy. Condemning Netanyahu and calling for a temporary ceasefire is not.
Oh, it was Dick Durbin. Sorry.
Oh well, Dick Durbin voted for the aid package to go to Israel. Back. So. A lot of these people saying that, there's a distance between how they vote and what they say when it's politically expedient during an election year. So one of the things I did want to bring up about Kamala Harris's speech and why it's so, telling about the Biden administration's policy is, and I mentioned this before, she says, that's the deal on the table. Hamas says they want a deal, and if they take it, we will let ample supplies in. We'll get the hostages back. But again, they've been for the past 2 weeks, and I've made videos on this, been positioning it as Hamas. Hamas is the one. They can't say Hamas is the one holding out negotiations because it's really Bibi. But they're trying to blame it. They're trying to position and frame it as when a ceasefire fails, it's going to be the fault of the resistance for not budging.
Yeah, you're right. They can't say that. It's like actually super well documented that that's exactly the opposite of what Hamas has been doing. They've been willing to take part in negotiating.
Well, they're going to pull the same strategy that they did with claiming that Palestinians, they were offered a state and they rejected it. It's the same. Yeah. It's the same methodology. It's like, okay, just because they're rejecting something doesn't mean they're rejecting a great deal. And, you know, you could offer them a cheeseburger in exchange for all the hostages, and you could say, hey, they rejected the deal. Like, we could have given them a cheeseburger, you know. But I want to say something on Kamala Harris's speech. How sick of a person do you have to be to tease that type of thing? Like, it's disgusting to me. But like, on a moral level, to say we are calling for a ceasefire pause of 6 weeks so that, and I'm like, that is
Kamala Harris was a politically climbing prosecutor. So you tell me what kind of personality does that?
Oh yeah, it's not far from the tree of how how she ran things in California towards you know, like the black population. But you know,
well, so what they don't realize and what they're not telling people is, if Hamas gives up all the hostages, there's a 6-week pause, and then the fighting resumes again. They have no political leverage. So if that's the only deal on the table, they're not going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, and part of their whole plan is, again, you know, the establishment of a Palestinian state. And if that's not even a conversation, I don't know how much room there is to move. And based off of the atmospherics coming out of Doha, they know they can't stay in power. They're not going to try at this point. But then again, they're also not going to compromise in a way, because like, this is their one shot, right, to, you know, get some sort of autonomy for Palestinians. So, you know, if it doesn't work now, it's not.
I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. I mean, people said that about Sinn Féin. People said that about Sinn Féin. That wasn't true.
Yeah,
you know?
Go on.
They said that Sinn Féin could never be a legitimate political party, right? You know.
Yeah.
And they are a significant one. So you know, we'll see. You can only tell them what to do if you still occupy and run them. And if that's not happening, then I don't think you get to say who's the political party in charge. You know, I don't think it's that simple.
Right.
They could also just pull you know, YPG. The Kurds do this, right? They're like, oh, the Americans can't give money to this group because they're on a list, so we'll just make another group. We'll reverse the letters. You can give money to that group, not this group, right? They play that political game real well.
Yeah, and based off Biden's appearance on Seth Meyers earlier, you know, like 5 days ago, he doesn't seem interested in the establishment of a Palestinian state either. It's just a talking point. It's more like, we'll work towards a process, you know, which is what they've been saying since the 50s. So, since the late 60s.
It's just pacifying language. That's all it is.
All of it's pacifying.
Yeah. They just want it to go away. They just want it to go away and stop.
But it's not going to go away unless they absolutely discard the First Amendment, shut down social media, and even then it's already too late. Like, we've already seen the images; they're already saved. I don't know what you're going to do: destroy the internet and blast yourself back to the Stone Age. Like, I'm not really sure how they'll accomplish.
They can't clean up. They can't clean up after themselves either. They've buried their own war crimes under, you know, under 2/3 of the city. So under 2/3 of Gaza. So good luck removing it all. And the UN's going to go in and find it all.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to hide it all. It's not possible.
And again, that sorry ass aid drop where they dropped MREs, which, again, if you're not familiar, guys, that's meals ready to eat, military field rations, out of a plane as a hedge in order so they can push back against accusations of complicity. Because, you know, they know, the CIA knows, they get briefed by the CIA and the Pentagon that a genocide is actually taking place. They know it. They just don't care.
Yeah, like you said, it was a sexy PR stunt. My question is, can we kind of outline for the audience how little of food that actually was in that airdrop, just to repeat the context of that in case people don't already know? What was the numbers you gave, Greg? That amount of food that was dropped is equal to like one meal for, I think, 28,000 people per day
No, there are apparently 38,000 meals based off of what we've seen on the ground. There were MREs. MREs are military field rations. They're actually pretty calorie dense, so
Yeah.
you can probably, split them up in between two people. I'm bad at the maths, but what is that, like 76,000 meals if you split them in half?
It's good for a snack for a day for that population. That's about it. Does nothing. It's just
they're like the normal ones. The normal warm weather ones are like 1,300 approximately calories a pack.
Yeah.
So they're enough. You can run on one a day for a while. And then they have the winter ones that are like 2 or 3 times that. But yeah, that's not what they drop, I'm sure.
But dividing it up between that many people who are actually starving to death, it's nothing. It's a snack.
No,
it's a potato chip, is what it is.
Well, it's not. You drop just enough to make people fight over it, really.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's part of the psychological terror. This is actually part of one of the objectives is to create psychological terror. The Nazis did the same thing. They starved Jews in the concentration camps, threw a piece of bread, watched them fight over it. It was part of the psychological torment that they would.
Well, yeah, and not to mention that they'll have they have strongman gangs going around monopolizing resources and selling them for 10x, which they'll turn around and say like, look at them, they turn on their own people, and then use like barbarizing language on them. But it's what happens in every siege. This is what happens during siege. If they didn't want it to happen, they would.
It's like what that imam said. You don't criticize the table manners of a starving man. So,
Well, the Germans did the same thing. Like I said, in the prison camps, they would use that as a PR stunt for the Germans. Say, hey, look at these Jewish people who are starving. Look at how they just, ravage each other and they don't care about each other. It's the same tactics. They're taken from that playbook.
Yeah, the more I think about that airdrop, the worse it is on so many levels.
Yeah.
Not just on the moral level, not just on the political level or the philosophical level. It was just bad. It was just so cynical. And then Kamala Harris's speech was just so cynical. And everything the U.S. government does this administration is doing is so cynical because it's like, okay, how can we support the Zionism of our masters and of Joe Biden and still win an election while enabling a genocide?
100%. Because here's how you know how cynical it is too on its face just by the numbers. We're all familiar with the logistics capability of the U.S. military. If the U.S. wanted to drop one MRE for every person on that ground over a 48-hour period, it could do it. There's multiple bases in the region. There's multiple supply stores in the region. There's plenty of transport aircraft in the region. So if they wanted to drop an actual effectual, which again, still ridiculous because all you have to do is drive trucks in from Egypt.
Exactly.
There's already a U.S. footprint in the Sinai. There always is. There's always a unit there. There has, or I don't know how long how long has that been a rotation? A long time. Anyway, there's a base right freaking there, right? And you could truck this stuff in no problem. But even if you were going to do an airdrop for I don't know what reasons, you don't want to distribute it or something and take that risk. I don't know. But even if you wanted it, the U.S. military could airdrop enough to actually have an impact, and they didn't. So, let's call it the government because they're not. I highly doubt generals are making a call on how much stuff got dropped.
How much do you think Americans buy that though? Like how many? Like I know it's speculative, but how much do you think it's working on the American population to see an airdrop and be like, oh, see, we're helping them? Is that effective?
I'm sure that's what a lot of people saw. I mean, even that was the response to the Jordanian one, and they dropped like 5 shoots. That I saw. And people were still like, well, at least they're doing something. So, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just to one Jordanian field hospital,
Yeah.
So people are like basically clinging on to any hope. So when they see aid, they're like, oh, thank God. It's, it's finally happening. Change is finally happening. It's not happening. The policy has not changed. The narrative hasn't changed. They've changed humanitarian pause because that wasn't acceptable to ceasefire for 6 weeks, which is not a ceasefire. It's a humanitarian pause. So Democrats can, win more primaries or whatever. And, they can just have the Muslims and the Arabs go away for like 6 weeks until they can re-platform and reframe and re-strategize their last PR push before November. Meanwhile, the Israeli government, though, it's not looking good. The internal divisions seem to be mounting. Bibi is reportedly enraged by by Gantz going to Washington, and it leaked that the Israeli embassy in Washington was ordered not to engage or like help in any way. So there's some petty like power plays going on as well there.
On Gantz, like Gantz and Bibi Netanyahu, we're taught that Gantz is more moderate. I mean, no, he's not.
He's still far right. No.
Yeah, he's still far right. So I just feel like all this is like good cop, bad cop bullshit. It's like, well, we could get Gantz. It's a hope that we can get Gantz, who's more moderate. It's a stupid narrative,
Yeah, I mean, like Mussolini was more moderate, right? So
yeah.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, it's not about him being more moderate. It's about him being more pliant and pliable to U.S. foreign policy in the region. Because again, we want to normalize. So I need to stop saying we. The United States government, the Biden administration, want to normalize relations between Israel and the Arab states.
Yeah.
So that's imperialist policy number one. And if Bibi Netanyahu is the one standing in the way of that, he's going to get crushed under the wheels, and Gantz will be elevated.
Yeah, the U.S. administration is still mostly disappointed about the Saudi-Israel deal not going through. That's what they actually still care about. I think that's the page most of them are still on.
What is Saudi's posturing right now on that? What's been the latest from them?
The latest is they say good things, but they want to normalize with Israel. However, they can't until a ceasefire happens, and then the nominal language for the potential for perhaps a future discussion about a two-state solution happens. But yeah, the Saudi government is going to basically an extension of U.S. policy that also influences U.S. policy, and they do not want to be associated with the global South, the government.
Yeah,
I mean, he's not as closely aligned as previous Saudi leadership has been.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where things stand in a nutshell. You have no substantial policy change from the Biden administration. You have a cynical speech from Harris. You have a cynical stunt in terms of airdropping. You've got political divisions between Bibi and a political rival. You've got manpower shortages in the IDF. They cannot effectuate a assault on Rafah or assault on the north. They're basically in a standstill and a strategic bind. Their funding is still locked up with the Ukraine bill and the border security fight. And yeah, I don't think there's going to be any substantive movement. I don't think they're going to assault Rafah this week. And I'm not sure how successful. I'm not sure how successful these ceasefire talks will be if the policy doesn't change. I mean, they're still Kamala Harris accidentally, tacitly, like their speechwriter was an idiot because they just tacitly implied that they know full well that they're using mass famine as a negotiating tool. That if you go and read this transcript of her speech, which I'm posting in the description, you will see she tacitly admits to using the humanitarian aid in response to mass starvation as a
bargaining chip. Yeah.
As a bargaining chip.
It's a very evil speech. It was a very evil speech when you write it out on paper, when you really think about it. Extremely evil. It goes beyond just like virtue signaling or any type of, deception. It's beyond that. It's pure evil, the way she did that. And the way she paused, to me, is just sick. It's sick. It's disgusting.
It's for a very specific audience, right? Yeah. You guys called it out. It's for American. That's for American liberals who aren't too tied up in the in the ongoing conflict and don't really care that much about Palestinians, and which
yeah. What a wide and wonderful world. Do you guys have any last comments? We're gonna wrap up and post this as quickly as possible.
Last comments.
Can't wait for these IOF stop loss movies to come out. It's gonna be great.
Oh yeah, random acts of violence when they come back on leave.
It's gonna happen. Mark our words. It's gonna happen. If it hasn't already.
It's already started. All right. Well, y'all, thanks for listening. I hope this was somewhat insightful. Just a free-form conversation about all the bullshit our government is up to. Hopefully we'll have better news by next week when we do this next Monday. All right. Thanks for coming on, guys, and see you next time.
See ya.